All right, so I am now recording. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to our foundational community supports training number 3, which is really going to focus on goal development. Okay, my name is Emily Bands. I'm going to be presenting. I'll be presenting this week and next week. I know you guys were with Shelly last week. And she's on as well as Francine. Francine couldn't be on today, but Shelly, Francine, and myself that are really going to be the trainers this round, okay? So welcome. Let's talk about goal development. Before we do that, just to let everybody know, today's November 17th. Next week will be November 24th, and we're going to be talking about the ISP components and applying the SMART framework. So you guys are just at the halfway mark of this 6-part series. So congratulations. I always like to congratulate participants when they've gotten halfway through. So wonderful. So let's get started. Before we do that though, just please be mindful about your audio and your video. Please make sure that if your audio is on, that you are muted. Shelly and I do kind of reserve the right to mute anybody if we find your audio to be distracting. Additionally, if you do have your video on, please be mindful of your background, of what you're wearing. This is a professional environment and a professional setting. I know that we're all home, but this is a professional place. So please be mindful of that. And again, we will be muting your video as well if we see anything inappropriate, okay? Additionally, if you don't feel like unmuting yourself to talk, please feel free to type in the chat box. Please make sure to select all panelists and all attendees if you want everybody else to hear what you're saying. And then again, the webinar is going to be recorded, and I currently started that already. So we're good to go with that, okay? So this is me. My name is Emily Bands. Just to give you all some brief background about myself, I've been working with Rutgers as a lecturer since April 2019. I've done some presentations before for Washington State. I've been on the Wednesday learning communities for supportive housing. I've done a couple of those and participated on a couple of those. And I think I'm on next month also. Additionally, I co-presented this training along with Shelly over the summer. And one of the reasons why I think Shelly and I were picked to do this is because Shelly and I do a similar training for our supportive housing staff out here in New Jersey. Before working at Rutgers, I actually worked in supportive housing in New Jersey. I worked as a direct care staff and then worked my way up to a program manager position before I transitioned to working for Rutgers. Additionally, I am a licensed professional counselor out here in New Jersey, and I do some private practice work. So I am continuing to work with clients. So I have a lot of client experiences from my past work, and then I have even more client experiences from my current work. So it's a little bit about me. It's my spiel. All right, so now that I gave you my spiel, now that I let everybody know about me, we went over the housekeeping stuff. Let's get started. So I'm going to ask everybody, Shelly and I love to give learning applications. So I'd like to know, was anybody able to do the learning application from last week? It was about using the wellness worksheet with a client. What information did you learn about the client from using the worksheet? And does anyone have any questions or concerns about the worksheet? So first things first, was anybody able to do the worksheet? Feel free to raise your hand, type in the chat box. Shelly just put the wellness worksheet in the chat box. Thank you very much. Ashley, you're raising your hands. Well, if I'm gonna call you now, Ashley. So since you're raising your hand, if you'd like to unmute yourself or type in the chat box, tell us a little bit about your experience. What information did you learn about your consumer when using the worksheet? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I used it on a couple of my clients that had came in recently, and I learned that it was kind of really sad because I learned that a lot of their numbers were low. But I was able to turn that, I was able to turn that into like a positive though, to be like, okay, well, this is where you're at now, but this is, where you're wanting to be. So let's get you there. What are some things we can do? So it was like,
Right.
it was a nice segue into finding out where they're at, where they're wanting to be, how motivated they are. And then like what to work off of too, so if their lower score is, financial or like their well-being, mental well-being, then I would know to direct them to, mental health specialist, or make sure that we're finding something that they can, sustain their livelihood off of. So that is what I found helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing. It can be a little, I think, disheartening for you as a direct care staff or clinician. It can also be disheartening for the consumer when they're rating things super low. But, we do our best to try to be cheerleaders and try to restructure that a little bit
Exactly.
and point it out as like, hey, well, these are all things that I can definitely try to help you with. This is what I can do to help you with X, Y, and Z. And then hopefully the next time you do the assessment, those numbers will be a little bit bigger. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you.
I have some people in the chat box. So Rebecca, you used the worksheet. You found it to be very helpful in determining what was important to the client. Absolutely. And that's one of the great things about that form, right? You're able to gauge where they're at and what's important to them, right? Because if something's at like a 2 and they're like, I don't really care that it's at a 2, it's not important to them, right? But if something's at a 5 and they want to get to a 7, then you know that this is something that they're valuing, something that they're willing to work on and might be motivated to work on. So absolutely. Thank you, Rebecca. All right, so I'm going to need some help pronouncing your name. Viridiana? If I said that correct, let me know. If not, please correct me. But you commented that you're able to use it. Oh, yes. Okay. Whew. As you all, I'm sure, saw, I spell my name kind of strange. So I understand how it feels when someone says your name incorrectly. So I'm happy I got that. So you were able to use it with one client. You learned a lot, especially where we can begin and where they can see themselves, and where there's work that you guys can get done together as a team. Absolutely, right? This work that we do is super collaborative. It also opened the floor for conversation they were willing to have with me without you asking. Yeah, right. That assessment is really good to sort of inadvertently prompt the person to kind of open up a little bit more if they're willing. So that's wonderful. Rebecca, I'm happy that you love it. It is a pretty name, Ashley. I agree with that. And Jamie, you also use the worksheet. I found it useful in identifying what type of wraparound services will be best for the individual. Yeah. So I love that you guys are not saying the same thing, right? Everybody's saying something a little bit different, getting something a little bit different about this from this worksheet, which I think is awesome because the worksheet is super versatile. So wonderful. I'm happy you guys are finding it helpful. All right, so let us move on. Thank you all for letting us know a little bit about your experiences with the wellness worksheet. So I know that you guys have done this poll already, but I've had the disadvantage, unfortunately, of not being on the past 2 trainings. Just to give me an idea of who we have out here in the audience, I am going to launch this poll again. So I'm just going to ask everybody to just let us know what region of Washington state you work in, what type of program you work in, what type of agency you work for, and then what is your primary role in your program, and then what's your level of experience, okay? And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to fill this out again. I know that Shelly did it in the first session. I'm not sure if she did it last week, but it's really helpful for me in terms of asking questions, where you all are at. So that would be super helpful. I only have a couple of people who have completed it. So I'm going to give everybody a minute to do that. Okay. So I have about almost half. We'll see if we can get up to half, and then I will close the poll. Oh, we have 62%. All right, I will do a last call. I'm going to give everybody another 30 seconds. Oh, Cynthia, I'm sorry it's not letting you submit. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why it's not letting you submit, but if you would like, Cynthia, feel free to tell us who you are, where you're from, what your experience is. All right, I will end the poll. We have 76 people that participated. Oh yes, that's actually a good point, Ashley. Cynthia, if you missed one, it might not let you submit. Thank you, Kelly. So we'll start off with you. You are from Washington State, Eastern Region. You work in substance use disorders and mental health services. Absolutely. So thank you, Kelly, for being here. I am going to end the poll. And let's look at these results. So we have a majority of people from the South. Can somebody say this? How do you say that? Puget? Puget. I have to let you all know I did do a training out in Spokane, and I was calling it Spokane, and you all were very kind in correcting me that it is not Spokane, it is Spokane. So I want to make sure I'm saying this correct. So the South Puget Sound, we have a majority of people, but we also have some from the north, from the peninsula, northeast, north central, northwest. Wow, you guys have a lot of norths. Southeast, south central, and southwest. All right, so we have a nice little variety of people, but mostly from the South Puget Sound. Majority of people in supportive housing. Some of you are in both supportive housing and supported employment. Some of you are unsure, that's okay. And some individuals in supportive employment, awesome. A lot of people are working in housing, but it seems like there's some mental health agencies, one medical agency, a community center. We have a lot of direct care staff. We have some peers on the line. We have some supervisors and managers, some clinicians. All right, and we have almost pretty even in terms of new and veteran. Awesome. So thank you again for everybody doing the poll. I really appreciate that because it gives me a better idea of who I am speaking with today. Okay. All right. So now that we got all of that out of the way, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is learn to recognize and look at some of these factors that determine readiness. Okay. And readiness is important when thinking about goal planning, right? Because you can very much want to work on some kind of goal, but you might not be ready, and that's okay, right? But as direct care staff working with consumers, it's super important for us to be aware of that, okay? Then we're going to discuss some ways to determine readiness, okay? So we're going to look at what you as direct care staff, you meeting with your consumers, can do to help figure out how ready your client or consumer is to work on a specific goal. And then we're going to look at this knowledge, skills, and resource form and how to utilize it and why it could be helpful for you to use in service plan development. And then we're actually going to break down the steps of a goal by using the KSR form. Okay. So sort of the first half of the training, we're really going to be talking about readiness. The second half of the training, we're going to be talking about knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, anything at all, please make sure to just type it in the chat box. Shelly and I are here to answer questions, and I will be monitoring the chat to make sure that everybody is okay and answer any questions that you have, okay? All right, so let's get started. So we always got to start with the golden thread, okay? I know this is something that Shelly has, I'm sure, discussed and spoken with you all about in the past 2 weeks, but this is really what we're here for, right? We're here to discuss the golden thread of FCS, okay? So today we're really going to be focusing on the identification of goals and almost the development of the individualized service plan, okay? Shelly went over the first part in week 1 and week 2, right? We talked about engagement, how to assess for medical necessity, and how to assess for strengths and needs. And then throughout the rest of this training, we're going to talk about how we're providing intentional services. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit more about the development of the individualized service plan. But we're going to talk a little bit more in the future about intentional services, about how to document those services and make sure that the services tie back to the plan, and then those services tie back to the assessment, right? Because it's not a golden thread if the progress note, if that document is not tying back to the plan, and if that is then not tying back to the assessment. All right. If you have any questions about the golden thread, let us know, okay? So the first piece of this goal identification is the comprehensive assessment, right? So this is what leads to goal identification, and it's based on valued life roles, it's based on unmet needs, and it's based on strengths, okay? So you're using an assessment tool to figure out what exactly it is the person needs to work on, right? And you're doing this by focusing on their valued life roles, which, as we know, can potentially be a motivating factor for individuals when they're thinking of working on something. We're looking at their unmet needs, right? And this is the areas where somebody can improve. So these are those areas that they may have rated low on the wellness assessment. And then we're focusing on their strengths, because those are the things the person has, are the things that the person doesn't necessarily need much help or what doesn't need to necessarily take time to work on. Okay. I need tea, people. So next we have this determining readiness. Okay. And this is going to be the first time I'm talking about this today. So I'm giving you all a disclaimer. But we added in this step as sort of an extra step to help you as a staff person figure out whether or not someone is actually ready to achieve a goal. Now, just because somebody is not ready does not mean that they should not be working on that goal. Okay, because you can be super motivated to work on something, but just not feel ready, right? You might have some worries, you might have some anxiety, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed. And that affect readiness, but not necessarily affect your motivation. Okay. So readiness is all about exploring interest in making change. Okay. Whether or not you have a desire, whether it's something that sounds good to you. Okay. Am I frozen? I'm back. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody see me? Okay. Okay, you guys can see me now. All right. Sorry about that. This is going to be, I guess we're still recording. All right, that's good to know. The recording did not stop. That's why hopefully Shelly is there and she was still recording. All right, so let me know, what was the last thing you guys heard me talk about? Someone let me know so I know where to go back to.
So Emily, we heard you talking about determining readiness and interest as being different from necessarily motivation, and then it started cutting in and out a little bit. If that helps.
All right, thank you, Shelly. I'll start there. Okay. So, like I said, and I apologize for that. Hopefully that does not happen again. That would really stink. But again, this idea of readiness does not necessarily mean that somebody is or shouldn't start working on a goal. Okay. I'm not sure if you heard me say this, but I said that readiness, or maybe feeling like you're not ready, can be that apprehension, that worry, that anxiety that you might get when you feel like a change is about to happen. And that's a really natural feeling, right? But readiness is something that can be overcome, and it should not deter somebody from wanting to work on a goal. But that's why exploring readiness can be helpful, right? Because you can have this desire to work on a goal, but you may not be ready to take action. But just kind of quelling some of these fears and really exploring this can help somebody to feel more ready. Okay. And then a little bit later down the line in the training, the other half of the training, we're really going to look at this idea of knowledge, skills, and resources and how to identify them in order to achieve a goal. Okay. So let's talk more about readiness. Okay. So there are really 4 factors that determine somebody's readiness to work towards a goal. Okay. The first factor is this idea of felt need. Okay. So felt need is the person's level of dissatisfaction with current circumstances. Okay. So this is what's, sort of motivating them in some ways to work on something or to make a change. Okay. So have you ever felt dissatisfied with something in your life? And you can just raise your hand. You guys don't have to go into detail if you don't feel comfortable. I don't want anybody to share things that they're not comfortable with. But I've had a lot of experiences myself where I've sort of just felt, thank you, Rachel, where I felt super dissatisfied with something, right? And I've had consumers that have felt super dissatisfied. I've had consumers that have come to me and said, I don't want to live here anymore, or I don't want to be in this relationship anymore, right? But there's no action that happens, right? There's no action. They continue to live in the environment that they've been living in. They continue to hang out with the people that they've been hanging out with and spending time with. Because yes, they have this level of dissatisfaction, but it's not enough to help them to make that change, okay? The next piece of it is commitment. Okay. So, this idea of commitment is the belief that change is possible and that change is going to be positive. Okay. So, it's that feeling of, I think, almost powerfulness that somebody has when they're like, yes, I can definitely do this. I can definitely make this change. This is achievable for me. And this is super important because how many of you have decided not to work on a goal because you didn't think you could do it? Anybody out there? Thank you, Candace, right? Rachel, absolutely. Oh, is your name Alana? That's a very pretty name. Ashley, Rebecca, cardio, Jamie, too often. Yeah, right? So that can 100% be a deterrent from us working on something. But after maybe exploring this change and kind of thinking about it a little bit more, have any of you ever been able to really commit to something and feel less overwhelmed and really feel like this is a goal that you could potentially achieve? Has anybody ever experienced that? I have. Yes, right? So that's why I really want to bring up again that readiness, okay, which is encompassed. Chrissy, last time you really committed to a goal was college. You know why, Chrissy? Because you had time in college. As adults, we don't have time for anything, let alone commitments. So I hear you on that. But this is why readiness is something that should be considered and is something that can be changed, right? Because it's very easy to be committed, to feel like you can't commit to something one day in terms of working on a goal. And then the next day, after thinking about it a little bit more, or even over some period of time, you do feel more committed to it. Okay. And then also this piece of making sure that you feel that the change will be positive in your life. And that's where this exploration of commitment comes into play. Next, we have internal knowledge. And internal knowledge is related to the person, right? That's why it's internal, and their desire, not desired, but their desire to change. Okay. So it's what we know about ourselves, right? And who we are as a person related to what kind of change we want to make, right? So for instance, since who was it? Rebecca, you broke up cardio. You brought up cardio. Okay. So for me, I don't do cardio. I'm going to be very honest with you. I do not do cardio. I am not a cardio kind of person. Okay. I don't like running. I don't like Zumba. A lot of people like Zumba. I don't like those things. Okay. But, and I was talking about this yesterday, I actually like sprinting. I actually don't mind sprinting. Um, so for me, even though cardio is not something I enjoy, finding some kind of cardio aerobic activity, right? Because we all need cardio, right? And I also like walking. So finding something that's kind of cardio related that'll give me that kind of exercise is what is helps me to be successful, right? And that is something that I needed to figure out for myself through a lot of trial and error in order to figure out whether or not I could potentially make a change in terms of like incorporating more exercise or into my like daily routine. Okay. So it's really getting to know yourself and having conversation with yourself or having a conversation with someone else about yourself in order to figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. Okay. And then the last factor is external knowledge. Okay. So this is knowledge related to the environment where the change is going to occur. Okay. So this is the knowledge of and what you need to know related to where this change is going to take place. Okay. And I feel like the easiest example I can have for this is a job related example. So, for instance, when you are wanting to find a job, right, there are certain environmental things that you need to take into consideration, right? Where you want to work, right? Do you want to work in your town? Do you want to work 30 minutes away from your town? Do you need to take the bus to your job, right? What's the work culture like, right? What is the work culture at the job? Is it fast paced? Does it seem like people are really all up in each other's business? And what kind of person are you, right? Going back to this idea of internal knowledge. Are you a social person? Do you want to get to know your colleagues? Um, Additionally, with environmental knowledge, for specifically related to our consumers, are there any environmental supports that our consumers might need in order to potentially pursue this kind of job? Okay. If we go back to something like exercise related, right? Do you need a gym? Do you need to go to a gym? Do you need gym equipment? If we're looking at like a goal related to activities of daily living, how many of you out there have a consumer that needs to work on an ADL goal? Raise your hand or tell me in the chat box because I know that's what's happening. A lot of all of them. Absolutely, right? So what do they need in their environment in order to achieve this goal, right? Do they need different supplies? Do they need a gas stove versus an electric stove? And I keep bringing that up in multiple different trainings because I don't like electric stoves. But what in their environment do they actually need? What do they need to know about their environment? Okay. So these are the 4 major factors of determining readiness. Okay. And to determine readiness, you can explore these factors with the consumer that you're working with. Okay. How do you think you could explore readiness with somebody? What might you be able to do? I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I just want to pose the question to see if anybody's catching on to where I'm going with this. Nah, I didn't think you guys were catching on, but that's okay. You can ask them, right? And you don't want to just ask them like, hey, what's your felt need in regards to readiness? You don't want to do that. We want to use open-ended questions. Okay. Yes, thank you, Kelly. Dude, just type that as it was coming out of my mouth. Yeah, you can use open-ended questions. Okay. So, no, you spelled it right, Kelly. Don't worry about that. But what I wanted to do, because I'm a very kind human being, is I wanted to give you all some questions that you can use to help explore these different factors of readiness. Okay. So, in regards to questions to explore felt need, it could be something like, tell me what you like or dislike about, the current situation. Okay. So, you know, let's say the person's goal is to, someone name a goal that one of your consumers is working on. Just type something in the chat box. Get a job. Okay. I'm assuming you work in employment, Rachel. Oh, Ashley, you too. Let's talk about jobs then, right? So in terms of asking a question to explore felt need, you might say to yourself, tell me what you like about not working, or tell me what you dislike about not working. In the same vein, if somebody is trying to change jobs, you might ask them, like, tell me what you like about your current job. Tell me what you dislike about your current job. In regards to finding an apartment, right? Maybe it might be about, what do you like about your current living situation versus what do you dislike about your current living situation? Okay. Another question you might ask is, tell me about what your life will look like if you do get a job. Tell me what your life will look like if you do not get a job, right? So every time I say make this change or your current situation, I'm referring to the goal that the person is trying to work on, okay? And then another question you could ask to help explore felt need is, how important is it for you to make this change? So how important is it for you to find employment? How important is it for you to find an apartment? Okay. So again, open-ended questions, they are very simple things, but they're very powerful, right? They really, and this is why it's more exploration, okay? Because we're asking very open-ended questions in order to have a conversation, in order to help the person flesh out whether or not they're ready, okay? And by looking at things like what you like or dislike about your job, or what you like or dislike about being unemployed, what you like or dislike about an apartment, what your life might look like or might what your life might look like if you do or do not make the change, right? What your life might look like if you do become employed versus not becoming employed. Asking and thinking about how important it is for you to become employed. These are things that are going to help you, or help the consumer, I should say, to really figure out whether or not they have this interest, whether or not they have this desire. Because again, felt need focuses on the level of dissatisfaction, right? So looking at these three questions, right, you're sort of figuring out how dissatisfied they are with the current situation and using that as sort of a catapult to help them to be ready to make a change. So let me ask you all this. Does this make sense? Do you guys see the connection between these questions and this idea of felt need, this idea of the level of dissatisfaction the person has with their current circumstances? Roxanne, you're giving me 100. Okay, cool. All right. Again, this is the first time that I'm sort of presenting on this information. So do you feel like this, just kind of so far with what we're talking about, do you feel like this idea of readiness is something that could be potentially helpful in the work with the individuals that you guys are working on? Think about that. Okay, don't answer now, but think about that. All right, cool. Thank you, Moira. All right, so let's talk about commitment, right? So again, commitment is this belief that change is possible and that it's going to be positive. Okay. So we're thinking about risks to making the change, right? So risks to getting a job, risks to maybe moving from one area to another area. Okay. Then looking at how this change is going to make your life better, right? So, how is this change going to improve your life? How is finding a job going to make your life better? What you actually, I'm going to just read this question word for word, okay? Because this is actually a more complicated question. So, in thinking about the change, which in this instance we'll use employment, right? In thinking about finding a job, do you expect to have to make any changes in yourself in order to find a job? And I really, really like this question, okay? I like this question because I think it's a really good question to help the person sort of assess themselves and whether or not this is something they feel like they can commit to. Okay. Because a lot of the times when you have a goal, there are a lot of other things that go into that, right? You can't just say, oh, well, I want to find a job, and then you find a job, right? It's not how it works, right? If somebody is thinking about finding a job and, you know, they really want to work in like, they really want to become an electrician because they think, oh, well, I'm going to make, $70,000 a year being an electrician. And they think that that's going to happen overnight. And maybe they're afraid of electricity. Um, that's probably not a good fit, right? The person would then have to learn and be comfortable with electricity, right? That's a big part of being an electrician. So really thinking about the changes that the person might have to make is really important. I think a better example of that might be the role that you guys have now, right? As a staff person working in foundational community supports. If you didn't really like helping people, do you all think that you would be able to do your job now? Because if I didn't like people, I don't think I'd be able to do my job. So again, that's something that would have to change for me. Or if I didn't feel comfortable speaking in large crowds of people, that'd be really bad for my job, right? That would definitely be something I would have to change about myself. And if I felt like I couldn't make that change, it could potentially affect the kind of job that I'm would be getting. Okay. And the last question is, tell me how people in your life can help you to make the change. Okay. So this is looking at different supports that you might have in your life and whether or not they can help you with making that commitment. Okay. So maybe for something like exercise, maybe it's something like walking with a friend, having a workout buddy, right? If it's a job, maybe you have a friend that's really good at writing resumes, or maybe your consumer knows somebody from their program that is able to help with resume writing, right? What supports can help them with that commitment? Okay. So next we have internal knowledge. Okay. And again, internal knowledge is knowledge related to the person and their desired change. Okay. So what is the most or least important um, well, this is a poorly worded question on my part. I think it was supposed to say, tell me about what is most or least important about exercising, okay, or about getting a job. It read weird to me. Tell me about what interests or disinterests you about getting a job. And tell me about what is most important to you about finding employment, okay? So again, all of these questions are focused on the person and their perception, their internal knowledge of how this change is going to, impact their life, right? Is it going to be interesting to them? Well, it might not be interesting. It might be uninteresting, right? It could be super important. It could not be important, right? I think I see some people writing this down. So if you're writing the questions down, I just want to make sure that you guys have them down. So I'll give everybody another second. And then we're going to go over external knowledge, and then we're going to do a little bit of an activity, and then we're going to move on from readiness. Okay. All right. So external knowledge. Okay. So tell me about what you will need to be successful at making this change, right? So tell me what you will need to be successful at finding a job. Okay. What resources is the person going to need? Um, Tell me about the ideal environment for the change you want to make, right? So, maybe somebody doesn't want to work out in the open, right? Maybe they'd rather be like in a warehouse. So if somebody's looking for employment at like a food store, they might do stocking, right? And then finally, tell me about where you need to go in order to make this change. So do you need to um, go very far away? Is that something that you want to do in terms of working at a job? Is this place where you're going to find employment accessible? Is the job accessible to you? Is the gym, because you want to lose weight, accessible to you? Is a local park accessible to you? And the thing about internal and external knowledge is I feel like they're very much connected. Because again, if somebody is unwilling to commute 30 minutes, they're probably not going to want to find a job that's 30 minutes away, right? So being able to understand who you are as a person and what you need and what your knowledge is related to the goal as an individual could potentially be connected to the different resources that you might need. Okay. All right. So just as a very short little activity, let's look at Patricia. Okay. So Patricia is a 35-year-old woman living in Kennewick, Washington. And I picked Kennewick, I will tell you, because Shelly and I are apparently going to be presenting at a conference there in a couple months. So we're going to Kennewick. So Patricia previously worked in a Safeway for 3 years before a brief hospitalization. And she has decided to return to work as it would help her financially, but she has expressed some ambivalence. Okay. So, what is a question you might ask Patricia to explore felt need? Okay. Somebody type in the chat box or unmute yourself and yell out what question you might ask Patricia to explore this idea of felt need. Alana, tell me more about your decision to return to work. I like that, right? So it's sort of opening up the gateway to maybe getting some information around, you know, what their current situation is, right? Why do they want to get a job? What's happening, right? Oh, Alan, is it work you want or is it money, right? Really making that differentiation, right? Rachel, what did you like about working in the past? Roxanne, tell me what you dislike about your current financial situation. I like that. Melinda, what is holding you back from returning to work? What feelings? Absolutely. I love these questions you guys are coming up. That's awesome. And Ashley, what feelings are you having? Let's talk about that. Absolutely, right? And I love how you made these questions your own. Good for you guys. All right, let's talk about commitment now. Okay, so what is a question to ask Patricia in order to help her explore her commitment? Okay, and again, commitment is really looking at the belief that this change is possible and whether or not this change will be positive in their life. So what question might you ask Patricia to help her to explore commitment? Oh, Ashley, what hours are you willing to work? Do you feel this will help you monetarily and emotionally? Oh, Alana, on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to returning to work? I love that question, Alana. It's very direct and very to the point, and you're using scaling, which is super awesome. Greg, what would it take to get you back to work, right? What exactly does the person, what steps does the person need to take? Would it be more feasible to start working part-time at first? Absolutely, Rachel. Awesome. What type of job do you see yourself in, right? Is this a job that, and that's actually a really good, is it Mikhail? Mikhail? Let me know if I said that correctly. Yes, thank you, Mikhail. So yeah, right, she previously worked at Safeway, but maybe Patricia doesn't want to work at another Safeway. Maybe she wants to do something different. Absolutely. Thank you. Chloe, are there any accommodations that could be made to make you feel more comfortable? Hours, job, role, etc. Absolutely, right? I think this is kind of leading us into this idea of exploring internal knowledge, right? Which is really knowledge related to the person and their desired change, right? So, what questions might you be able to ask to help Patricia sort of determine readiness in regards to exploring her internal knowledge? I couldn't find the word explore and it's written on the PowerPoint, but I found it. So how would you help her explore internal knowledge? Ooh, what didn't you like about working? I like that question, Rachel, right? Because maybe Patricia didn't like working, right? And if we go back to Alan, right? Alan brought up a really good point. Does Patricia want to go back to work for money, or does Patricia want to go back to work to actually work, right? So Patricia hated working. She might not be ready to go back to work, right? Can you tell me a little more about what led up to your hospitalization and while you were working at Safeway, right? And I think that's a really good question, Alana, right? Because we don't know why Patricia ended up going to the hospital, right? Was she overwhelmed with work? And I'm not, and I think that's a good question. Obviously, if you know about the person, I don't want us to kind of make this assumption that, just because somebody's working and they have a mental illness, that's going to mean that their job is going to cause them to have symptoms. Because I think for a lot of people, working is actually a way to help people cope with their symptoms. But I think that's a very good question worth asking, because for all we know, Patricia may have been feeling very stressed at home, and maybe going to work and working was just too much for her. Maybe she stopped working because of COVID and she didn't feel safe in a supermarket. That's also very possible, right? We don't know. So I think that's a really good question, Alana. And then finally, what is a question to ask Patricia to help her to explore her external knowledge? And again, external knowledge really looks at the environment where the change is going to occur. Okay, so what question might you ask Patricia to help explore her external knowledge? Do you have any friends that are working? Okay. Right. Are there any supports? I like that. Kelly, tell us about your transportation needs. Right? How's she going to get to work? Okay. So Alan, because you asked, this is my smiley face coffee cup. This coffee cup holds almost 750 milliliters of tea, which I need very much when I do these trainings. So thank you, Alan. I appreciate you commenting on that. Getting back to external knowledge, though, any other questions that you could ask Patricia to explore external knowledge? I'll give people another second in case you guys are typing. I don't want to cut anybody off, because we're going to switch gears in about a minute. Okay. And if you guys liked this readiness and exploring readiness, please make sure to let us know in the evaluation, because again, this is the first time we've done this. And we thought it might be helpful and we thought it might fit here. So let us know. Okay. All right. So I think we are ready to move on to knowledge, skills, and resources. So again, we talked about this assessment, how it leads to goal identification based on valued life roles, unmet needs, and strengths. We talked about determining readiness and how that helps to explore interest and make a change. So now we're going to talk about knowledge, skills, and resources, okay? And I think this idea of determining readiness flows very well into knowledge, skills, and resources, because I think you will find that some of the information that we talked about in terms of determining readiness really flows into knowledge, skills, and resources, right? Because guess what? In order to achieve a goal, the person is going to either need knowledge, skills, or resources, okay? That's just hands down what people need, okay? They need knowledge, skills, or resources. Anything that the person needs is going to fall into one of those three categories, okay? So what we're going to talk about now is this collaborative process to help someone differentiate between current knowledge, skills, and resources they have, which are then strengths for the person, and then knowledge, skills, and resources they need in order to meet their goal, which is the unmet need. Okay. So again, this is a really good segue, especially when thinking about external knowledge, because in terms of external knowledge, to me, that really has a lot to do with resources. Okay. And it's knowledge, so it's knowledge too. All right. So in terms of barriers to goal achievement, okay, most of the time, barriers to goal achievement can really fall into these three categories of knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay. When someone is unable to achieve a goal, it is likely has to do with lack of goal related knowledge, goal related skill deficits, or lack of needed resources. Okay. However, um, by overcoming these barriers, it helps the person to achieve that goal. Okay. So by attaining knowledge, by learning skills, and by acquiring resources, people are able to overcome these different barriers and actually work towards achieving goals. And that's why in our training that Shelly and I do, we focus so much on knowledge, skills, and resources, right? Because if someone is working on a goal and they need to know something and they learn that, then they're able to achieve the goal potentially. Same thing with skills and same thing with resources. Okay. So when breaking down this idea of knowledge, skills, and resources, okay, knowledge is what the person needs to know. Okay. Skills are what the person needs to do, and resources is what the person needs to have. Okay. And again, very simple. Okay. I will say that sometimes knowledge, skills, and resources overlap. Something could potentially be knowledge and also be a skill, and then eventually become a resource depending on where the person's at. For example, if we look at budgeting, right? Budgeting in and of itself is a skill, right? Because it's an action. It's got this ing word. It's an action that we do in order to learn how to manage our money, right? But if someone doesn't really know anything about budgeting, that could then be knowledge. Okay. Additionally, with resources, right? Something like a budget worksheet or something to help you learn how to budget could then be a resource. Okay. Um, Thank you, Jennifer. I think that's a good point. And I thought I kind of, I guess I didn't highlight that in the same way you are. So I did say that because someone might not feel ready to work on a goal doesn't mean they should not work on a goal. But just to be clear, because I do think it is worth mentioning, Jennifer, I do agree that readiness is not a requirement for program participation. Okay. So for permanent supportive housing, the model that I know a lot of agencies follow, the fidelity scale does not want readiness in the equation, right? Because if somebody wants to work, it's our job to help them work, right, Jennifer? So I appreciate you bringing up that point. So yes, readiness is not a determination for services. It's just something to consider to kind of help somebody figure out what exactly it is they want to work on. Because the other piece of this is if somebody is not ready to work on one goal, again, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be ready 3 months from now or 6 months from now. So maybe they hold off on working on that goal and then work on it later. But I know for something like employment, if somebody's receiving employment services, it's a little bit different, right? Because they're there for employment services. They're there to find a job, and that's what your job is. Is that kind of in line with what you were saying, Jennifer? Yes. All right. Awesome. Cool. I got you, Jennifer, because I agree. I do think it is worth writing. So thank you and talking about. All right, so let's get back to KSR and let's look at the 3 different steps to exploring knowledge, skills, and resources. We're doing a lot of exploring today. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is collaborate to create a list of what is necessary to achieve the goal. And that is called brainstorming. Okay, so what you're really going to do, and I'm going to show you an example of this, I'm going to show you a video of this. But what you're really going to do is sit down with the person and take a piece of paper and write down everything that is necessary to achieve the goal. Even if they have that knowledge, even if they have that skill, even if they have that resource, you want to write it down. Okay, so you're going to brainstorm. Then you're going to categorize. Okay, in categorizing, you're going to identify if the listed items are a knowledge, a skill, or a resource. Okay, so we have a specific form for this that we're going to show you a little bit later. But you have a specific form that you're going to use, and you're going to figure out if this thing is knowledge, skills, or resource. And then you're going to work together to determine preparedness. Okay. And this is when you're going to assess. This is when you're going to do that step of figuring out whether or not the person has this knowledge, skill, or resource, whether or not they have some knowledge of the skill of whatever it is they need to know. Maybe they need a little help with learning more about something. Maybe they need a little help with practicing a skill, or whether or not they absolutely do not have the knowledge, skill, or resource. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all a video. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And I am going to open this up. Okay. So this video that I'm going to show you stars myself. I wish I could say I was kidding, but I'm not. It does actually star me. And it's a role play that I participated in with one of my colleagues who previously worked in the department. Okay. So it's just taking a minute for this to load. Shelly, if you're there, are you there, Shelly?
What can I help with? Emily?
Oh, okay. I was going to ask you if you could bring it up.
Sure.
But
Yeah, just give me a moment.
I might. Yeah, because I don't think I don't have the internet connection that I wish I did, guys. So just give us a minute. Shelly's going to share her screen. I don't really trust my computer right now, actually. So thank you, Shelly. So going back to this video as Shelly pulls it up, it's a video that myself and a colleague did in order to demonstrate to people how to go through this process of using the knowledge, skills, and resources form in order to teach somebody how to or work and collaborate with somebody in order to identify knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay. So our department has a specific form. I'm going to make sure that you guys get that after the video. I want you guys to just take a look at the video first. But there is a specific form that my department developed in order to help service providers to go through this process of exploring knowledge, skills, and resources. Okay. So here's the role play. I'm going to ask Shelly to press play, and I hope you guys enjoy the video.
Zaki, how are you? Good. So I just wanted to follow up because I know last week when we met and started talking about some of the goals that you want to work on, you talked a little bit about two different things. One was cooking and the other one was going back to school. So I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about that and start to plan out the steps for your IRP.
I think that sounds great. I was really thinking about it, and I definitely want to pursue going back to school, but I also really want to learn how to cook.
Yeah, it's a really important skill, especially since you just moved in. What are some things that you're interested in learning how to cook? What types of foods?
Well, I'm vegetarian, so that limits some food items that I can eat. So I just made the change for health reasons, and I'm not really sure what are good foods to eat to maintain a healthy diet, but still not eat meat products.
So it sounds like you're really focusing on your nutrition, and so learning how to cook healthier items would really contribute to your wellness that you're really trying to incorporate into your life.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I've used in the past is something called a knowledge skill resource form, and that really could give me or us a better idea as to things that you're already doing, skills that you already have in terms of cooking, and areas that maybe we can include on the IRP. Would you be open to having a conversation? And the KSR is actually right here. I brought it with me, and we could fill it out together.
Absolutely.
So the first thing, before we even look at the form, is I just wanted to brainstorm just some ideas of what you think are steps or things that anybody would need to either know, skills that you would need to do, or maybe even resources or items that you might need if you're preparing to cook?
So I definitely think I would need recipes because I'm not really good at looking at a set of ingredients and just putting them together off of the top of my head. So I would need some structure with that. I would need the food listed in the recipes, which is good because the recipes are a great guide. That's why I like to use them. I actually love to read, so maybe even a cookbook.
That's a really good idea. And I'm sure some of the cookbooks will have recipes in it as well.
Absolutely.
I know you just moved in. Can I provide some suggestions to you? I know when I first moved in my place, one of the things that was helpful for me, because I like to bake, measuring cups.
Yeah. I don't think I
Measuring spoons.
Yeah, I don't think I got that.
What about measurements? I know sometimes that can be confusing for me. So whether they use the abbreviations TSP versus
TBS.
Yeah.
I never know which is which.
exactly. So would that go along with the terminology?
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely have that in. I was also gonna say, and I don't know if this necessarily is a huge piece of this, but food items like vegetables tend to go bad quickly. So I definitely would have to manage my time so that when I'm purchasing the food items, everything stays fresh and nothing goes bad.
That's a really good idea. All right, so we have a list of 11 items. So that's the brainstorming process. So now that we have that, we're going to flip it around to the actual form, and you'll see here that it's broken down into 3 different categories, whether it's a knowledge, skill, or resource. And so with that, what I would say is if we can go through all of the items and try to decide if what we listed either falls into the knowledge, what you need to know category, whether it's a skill, something that you need to be able to do, or if it's a resource, something that you need to have in order to accomplish your goal of learning how to cook. So the first one is recipes. Do you think that's a knowledge, skill, or resource?
I would say it's a resource.
The next one?
So food items I would say is also a resource.
Okay.
The cookbook is a resource. Actually, these two could probably go together.
Yeah, so we can keep it as a resource for now. I do want to go back to food items too. I see that you put it as a resource, and I agree with that. Do you think it also could be something that you need to know as far as what food items you might need for a recipe?
Yeah, because I can't just go to the store and pick anything.
Yeah.
I have to follow the recipe. So I do need to know what food items to purchase.
And you'll see sometimes as we go through this that some of the items might fall into 2 categories, but that's fine. So the last part of what we're going to do for today, because I know you have to run out, is looking at whether you have a good understanding or have the particular resource we have listed. If you have an understanding but you need a little bit more assistance, or if it's something that maybe you're not aware of at all, or a resource that you just need to acquire that you don't have. So if we go through each of the items, so food items, knowing what food items you would need for a recipe, is that something that you have a good understanding of, you have somewhat of an understanding but need education, or you really, could benefit from some support in that area?
I think I could really benefit from some support in that area.
So let's just put an X or a check there.
Okay.
Terminology and abbreviations.
I need a lot of help with that.
Okay. That's great. And so what I do want to point out though is that all of these items over here where we have need more education, need to learn the skill, or need to acquire the resource, we can take a look at that the next time I come over to really see if those are steps that we can outline on the IRP. But look what you're already starting with. So you already know how to budget. You're already paying your rent on time. And I know from visiting with you over the last couple of weeks, you do seem to have enough food. And you're able to go grocery shopping. You do use coupons sometimes, which is really good.
Yeah.
And luckily, a family member gave you pots and pans. So those are really all strengths that can really help and contribute to achieving the goal of cooking. So
Thank you so much, Zakia.
No
This was
problem.
really helpful.
All right. So that was our knowledge, skill, and resource role play. Somewhat of a real play. I like to think I'm a really great cook, but Zakia actually brought up some really great points to me when we were going over that. So give me a second so I can pull the PowerPoint back up. So after watching the video, tell me a little bit about what you guys thought about seeing this process in action. And Shelly, if you wanted to put the KSR form in the chat box now, thank you very much. But yeah, tell me a little bit about what you guys thought about this process. I think it's when I first started utilizing this tool, it was very easy for me to jump right into wanting to only talk about the things that the person actually needed for their goal. So when I was using this process, it was really hard to make sure that I was actually talking about everything, but it is super important because again, when you're asking somebody about strengths, if you're having that conversation in the assessment process, sometimes people don't know what their strengths are, but really putting things on paper can be very helpful for people. So that was a really big takeaway for me. Ashley, you said it seems to be a good segue for clients to realize strength. Yeah, we're just talking about the same thing. And weaknesses to get their gears turning. Absolutely, but we don't like to call them weaknesses here. We do call them unmet needs, right? Because that's really what this person is going to need to attain, whether it's knowledge, skill, or resource in order to get to that goal. And yeah, Michelle, the brainstorming section is perfect for that. And it helps keep the person focused on a goal. We know that some people don't like papers. I had a client who just had like a whole box of papers and he just kind of kept them, didn't ever read them, didn't ever go back to them. So some people aren't paper people, but having something written down on paper can be very helpful. The other thing I will mention about this is for some people, if you keep this form in their chart or in your desk locked away, you can bring in that back in 6 months or a year when you actually do the IRP review. And if the person still needs to work on this goal, you can look at the other unmet needs that are identified on the form to see what they might want to work on now. You might have to reassess. You know, it's a good tool to use and to kind of keep having. There was somebody who mentioned something in the chat. Chris, you said it seems like it would be a lot easier to assist a client with a goal if they are ready versus if they are asked to make one because a box needs to be checked. Absolutely. I think when you're looking at whether or not somebody's ready to do that, or whether or not maybe your agency is recommending it, or whether or not family or friends are recommending it, is super important because, yeah, the person already has that buy-in because they want to work on it. But again, I just want to make it super clear that just because somebody isn't ready to work on it, right? It's less, I think, about what you're saying, Chrissy. It's less about maybe feeling ready, right? Because again, ready is more about interest. It seems to me you're talking more about desire. If somebody has a desire to work on something, they're definitely going to be more willing to work on it. In terms of readiness, a person might not be ready, but again, there are things you can do to help the person to become ready. And that could be a goal in and of itself. That could be an objective in and of itself. We're going to talk in, I think, next week, we're going to talk a little bit about, or the last week, we're going to talk a little bit about stages of change. And stages of change kind of play into this, because when somebody's ready to work on something, what stage of change do you guys think they're in? If anybody out there who knows a little bit about stages of change, if somebody's ready, what stage of change do you think they're in? Exactly, Rebecca, action, right? So when somebody's in an action stage of change, it's a lot easier to work on a goal also. But just because somebody is in pre-contemplation and contemplation doesn't necessarily mean that working on the goal isn't a good idea. And there are different things that you can do as a staff person to help the person move from pre-contemplation to contemplation to preparation to action. Okay, so I just want to be clear about that. But that was a good point. So thank you, Christy. All right, so let's do some practice now. Okay, so if we're looking at this goal of taking medication, okay, these are all of the things somebody might need to take medication. Okay, they're going to need the names of medication, right? They might need that. They might need information on the pill size or color. They might need to know how often to take each pill. They might need to know how to store different medications or where to store different medications. Okay. In terms of taking medication, they might need a pill box. They might need to learn how to fill the pill box. They might have to learn how to call the pharmacy for refills, or might need to know where the pharmacy is. They might need to learn how to use an alarm and set an alarm. They might not, or maybe they don't need an alarm. Maybe they need something else. They might also need some funding, right? So they might need to call some different prescription assistance programs, and they might need to know where to find those. And then you actually need the medications, right? If you're going to learn how to take medications, you need the medications. You're going to need a pill box. You might also need prescription assistance programs, and then you might need the actual alarm, right? If you're learning how to set the alarm, you're going to need an alarm, okay? So this is sort of what this brainstorm process might look like if you were meeting with somebody, right? You're just putting everything down on paper, and you're trying to figure out what exactly the person's going to need in order to work on this goal, okay? So I want to do some brainstorming together, okay? So if we look at what goal of taking a shower, okay, here I have listed what items are needed, purchasing different items, right? How to get those items for the shower, how to get in and out of the shower, how often you might take a shower, what consequences there might be if you don't take a shower. You might need money to purchase hygiene products. What other things go into this goal of taking a shower? Okay, what's some knowledge, what's some skills, what's some resources? Okay. How to use the shower? Absolutely, Harrison. What else? Ooh, the towels, right? And not even just the towels, Bill. How to wash the towels, right? You don't want to use a dirty towel. That's definitely not good. That's a really good point, Bill. I don't think that has ever come up. Shelly and I had used this example a lot. And I don't think knowing how to wash towels has ever come up. But that's a really good point, because realistically speaking, that could be a skill in and of its own, right? So thank you, Bill. Anybody else? Yeah, so important. I hear you, Shelly, right? How much shampoo, conditioner, and body wash to use. Sometimes they say a quarter size amount. Sometimes they say a pea size amount. Sometimes people say 3/4 sizes. It varies, Michelle. So absolutely, thank you. Anything else somebody might need? And a timer for the length of the shower, right? Yeah, because if you're paying the water bill, you don't want to be showering for an hour, do you? Thank you, Harrison. How to pay the water bill. Thank you, Rebecca. Wow, I have to say, you guys are coming up with some really good stuff. How to adjust the temperature of water? Absolutely. Cynthia, can you clarify what you mean? Because the way I'm reading it, it's not computing in my brain. Any other things along with taking a shower? How to use a walk-in shower versus a tub and what the best fit for the person is. Absolutely, Roxanne. And I want to use that as a point to make because different showers, different appliances work differently than other appliances. Oh, okay, Cynthia, thank you. That makes more sense. Yes, if you're working with somebody in the trans community, seeing their body might be something that's difficult for them. So making sure that they have appropriate coverings in order to take a shower and feel comfortable doing that is a really great point. Thank you, Cynthia. I thought that's what you were saying, but I didn't want to assume. So thank you for clearing that up for me. And yes, Harrison, have a shower chair or grab bar. But different appliances work differently, right? So have any of you ever gone to a hotel and had no idea how to use the shower? Because that might just be me. Yeah, thank you. Okay, good. I'm getting some yeses here. Yeah, right. You get into the shower and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to use this. One of my previous colleagues actually worked with a consumer who they practiced using a gas stove to cook. And when he moved into his apartment, he used an electric stove and he didn't know what to do. And he ended up almost causing a fire in his apartment building because of that, right? So being able to learn on the appliance and making sure that whatever appliance you're using transfers over to the appliance that the consumer is actually going to be using is super important. Wow, so you guys came with some great stuff. So just to kind of reiterate, right, you might also need to know what parts to wash. In reference to that, one story that Shelly and I like to tell in regards to this is one of the consumers that someone in one of our programs out here in New Jersey was working with was just having a lot of trouble with the actual showering piece and knowing what to wash and where to wash. So the manager who was telling this story let us know that they walked into work one morning and they heard the shower on. And they went over to the shower confused because why is the shower running? And the staff person was fully clothed in the shower, modeling and demonstrating how to wash themselves. And the consumer was standing outside of the shower. And that's what it took. And after that, I don't think they had a problem. But yes, knowing what to wash and how to wash it and actually doing that modeling. An alarm or calendar for reminders, right? Maybe someone's just simply forgetting when to shower. Using a shower faucet. Using a shower, right? So how to use the faucet, what shower mat to use. Yeah, Amber, it actually was pretty cool. And that's why I keep mentioning the story. If you guys have ever been on a training with me before, I probably mentioned the story already, or Shelly has. But I think it's worth mentioning because that staff person really went above and beyond to teach the person how to use the shower. Yeah, and that's how you show. I mean, you might not necessarily have to get in the shower. You might be able to maybe find like a YouTube video that might demonstrate it, but sometimes with YouTube videos, sometimes they're made for like kids to show kids how to do things. So that's, you have to be careful with that. You don't want to show an adult a video that's meant for a child. But yeah, like actually just getting up there and demonstrating, like, here is the soap, here's how I would wash my arm, right? That's something that you could potentially do. And then yes, using these hygiene items, so a washcloth, a soap, a razor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing because I want to put everybody into breakout groups. So what I'm going to ask people to do is I want everybody to sort of practice using this KSR form, okay? So if you don't want, oh gosh, I just sent it to Ashley. I'm going to put this again in the chat for everybody, okay? So I want everybody to open up this KSR form, get it open on the screen, and I'm going to put everybody into breakout groups, okay? So I want there to be two people in every room. Okay. So I want there to be 2 people in every room, and I want everybody to utilize the KSR form, come up with a goal. You don't have to necessarily role play in this situation, but I do want you to work with a partner, and I do want you to kind of somebody be the person who wants to work on a goal. So I guess I do want you to role play. I changed my mind. So I want one person to be the participant, and I want the other person to be the staff person. And that's okay, Sonia. So what I'm going to ask is if you cannot participate, and I'll get to that in a minute, right? Let me focus on the directions here. Okay. So I want you to get into groups. I want you to work with somebody. So what I want you to do is if you're don't planning on participate, I'm going to put you into a breakout room anyway. Just don't go into it. Okay. Stay here. Don't go into the breakout room. Okay. And then what I want you to do is if you can't go into the breakout group, I want you to do this on your own and review the form. Okay. But what I want you to do is if you are in a breakout group, I want you to come up with a goal and go through this process of brainstorming. Don't play a role, don't pretend to be a client, but I do want somebody to be the counselor and be the one sort of leading this conversation. And I want the other person to be the one who's coming up with a goal. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? I want to make sure I'm being clear with the directions. All right. All right. So for those of you, again, for those of you who are not, for those of you who are not in a, for those of you who could not be in the breakout group, just stay here. Okay. And I will move people around. Okay. But I'm going to give everybody like 10 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to, and yes, Greg, you're absolutely right. You don't need a camera. You just need to have audio, Alan. So if you have audio, if you are connected to audio, you should be able to do that. But if you don't want to participate, that's fine. Again, I'm just going to ask if people don't want to participate, just don't move into the breakout room. Okay? All right. So I'm going to move people. Okay. And again, if you're not going to be in the breakout group, just stay here. Okay. So I'm going to have everybody go. It's about 1:58. I'm going to pull everybody back in about 10 minutes. That should be enough time for everybody to come back. But I'm going to give you all about 10 minutes. Okay. So break. So everybody who's not in a breakout room, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So for those of you that are here, again, just look over the form. Let us know if you have any questions, but just sort of figure out how you might use this with one of your consumers. Okay, thank you. Resume our recording. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the big group. So now that I have you all back here, first, and I don't believe I asked this question, so now is probably a good time to ask, but have any of you out there actually used the knowledge, skills, and resources form, or have you heard of it before? Okay, good. So I'm getting some no's. So I'm hoping that a majority of you this is a no from you, and that this is something new that we've shared with you, which is awesome. So good. I'm happy to hear there's so many no's. So for those of you who were able to utilize this with a partner in the breakout group, tell us all a little bit about your experience. I'm going to give everybody like a minute or two to type something in the chat. If you would prefer to, let me know by unmuting yourself, please feel free to do that also. But yeah, tell us all a little bit about what your experiences were using the form. So Roxanne, you've used something similar, but not like this format or like this format? And anybody else out there would like to share what your experiences were using the form? Or if you don't want to share what your experiences were using the form, tell us a little bit about how you think you might be able to incorporate this into your work. Do you feel like it's something that you will be able to incorporate? Do you feel like it's not something that you're going to be able to incorporate? Tell us a little bit about that. Oh, Michelle, you gave me a lot of information. Thank you. So the goal was to learn how to make an apple pie by the end of the week. For knowledge, you need to know what type of kitchen items do you need, what type of staple ingredients do you need, what kind of recipe do you want to follow, what kind of safety equipment you would need. For skills, measuring ingredients correctly, liquid versus dry, following the directions on the recipe, converting measurements. Oh my goodness, converting measurements. Practicing safety measures. For resources, cookbooks, kitchen equipment, and essentials, ingredients, how to bake an apple pie tutorial. So Michelle, let me ask you this. Were all of these knowledge, skills, and resources that you guys compiled, was this stuff that you all already knew? Or was some of this things like resources you might need, or skills you might need to learn, or knowledge you might need to learn? Some. Okay. So let me ask you this, and I'll also pose this question to everybody else. Oh, okay. You never baked an apple pie, but you would like to learn to. Yes, I get that. And tis the season, right? But just to ask everybody, when you got into this process of breaking down the goal into these knowledge, skills, and resources, were you amazed at how much knowledge, how many skills, and how many resources you need in order to achieve a goal? Was that something that was like shocking to anybody? Yes. Thank you, Nicole. Anybody else? Let me know if it's a yes, because I know that was something that I personally experienced when I first started using this form. And it was a little overwhelming, I think, to break it down in this way. But I would say a majority of the time, the consumers I was working with found this to be helpful because they were able to see everything on paper, which was helpful to them. You were not shocked. But I hear you, Alicia. Thank you. Kelly, we used to have to break down the steps it took to complete a goal from another employer I worked for. Yeah. And again, like it's good to break things down. Again, sometimes it can be too much, but I think it's a good way to kind of visualize everything. I've also gotten some feedback. I'm sorry, Mindy, you didn't get to try it. I tried to make sure there was at least 2 people in every breakout group. I'm sorry that the person wasn't there. And yeah, it does get to, I think, can be a lot. But when it's good because I think a lot of the times all this information is kind of up in our head. And that is what can also be overwhelming to people. But by putting it on paper, I think things can sometimes get, and at least this is what the feedback I've gotten from people is things can be a little bit less scary when you're writing things down on paper and you can kind of visualize it. And then once you put it down on paper, you can pick like 2 or 3 things to work on over whatever period. And then again, you have this piece of paper for the next 6 months, for the next year. And then, when it's time to review the plan, you're able to, go back to it and kind of figure out, what steps you need to do next. Okay, so Crystal, you're saying you don't see using it, and that's okay. You said our clients come to us to find housing, and they already have a lot of steps to traverse before we can actually get moving on making progress on that goal with the intake, treatment plan, agency docs, etc. Yeah, and you're right, Crystal, and I think that's a great point that you bring up, that this is another piece of paper that you can or then would have to implement. Crystal, just to ask, do you have time limited services? Is your role just to help somebody find housing? Yes. Okay. And I absolutely agree with you, Crystal. This probably would not make sense, especially if housing is just what you do. This definitely would work better in maybe in an employment. Anybody out there from employment, do you guys think that this might be helpful for you? But I do know that for people working in mental health, and I can say that because that's where I primarily used it, in mental health supportive housing. That there can be a plethora of goals that you're working on with somebody. It could be about housing, but it can also be about ADLs. It could be about managing their symptoms. So this can also be helpful with that. Okay, Ashley, you feel like it's really busy. Okay, I appreciate the feedback, Ashley. Thank you. All right, so for you, Rebecca, oh no, not Rebecca. For you, Michelle, you work in housing, but you also provide intensive case management, so this form would be helpful. Yes, I could see this definitely being helpful in the intensive case management. Rebecca, you're in housing and you use a similar tool to create self-sustainability plans. Okay, Rebecca, are self-sustainability plans, is that your service plan? And yes, Cynthia, so this format can help to show the person's knowledge, skills, and resources versus the assumptions that a case manager might have about the knowledge, skills, and resources the person has. And I also think that's a really good point, and I'm happy you brought that up, because I know for me, when I was working with people, sometimes I would assume what knowledge, skills, and resources the person had. And that would kind of get me into trouble because maybe I forgot to ask or it didn't come up in conversation. So I kind of went with the assumption that, yes, they do know how to use a stove. And then when we went in front of the stove, they did not know how to use the stove. So that was kind of an extra layer that then had to be added into their service plan. So yes, Cynthia, I think that's a really great point. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying, Rebecca. So the plan is for the consumer to create, to eventually come off the program. and eventually learn how to pay their own rent, so to speak. Okay. Yeah. And for something very specific, like learning how to pay rent, it's very much something that can be broken down into different steps. So I hear that. Mindy, you said, I like this because a lot of people show up thinking they have no strength or no resources. So looking further into it and asking the right questions can be illuminating to the client and give them a sense of ownership of their plan or next steps. Absolutely, Mindy, right? I had a lot of consumers I worked with that's where they were at, really. They were at this place where they didn't think they had anything. And once we sat down and actually did this form, it was super helpful for them to see some of the things that they did have. You think Greg, you think that certain personality types of clients would enjoy this, the kinds of people who just enjoy paperwork. Other types of personalities would say that charting all this out is just busy work, but would enjoy it as part of a conversation without another form to fill out. And absolutely, Greg, you don't have to use this form. I will say that a lot of the support staff out here in New Jersey, they don't actually use the form. What I suggest staff to do is if you feel like you're meeting with somebody that's not, into forms, that's not into writing things down, to just, when you're having this conversation, make sure that if you're just kind of brainstorming, you are focusing on the things that are both things that they need and things that they already have. Because again, you always want to be able to highlight the strengths. And no, absolutely not, Greg. I'm not taking it as criticism at all. But I hear that a lot of people don't like paperwork. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but I had a lot of clients that didn't want to fill out any more paperwork. So you can just use this as a conversational tool, especially if you read over the form and get yourself familiar with it. You can use this as more of a conversation. But again, just make sure that you are highlighting the things that they have versus the things that they need, because discussing strengths is super important. And if you're just speaking with them about the knowledge that they need, the skills that they need, the resources that they need, you're sort of missing out on that aspect. But thank you, Greg. I appreciate that feedback. You're not the first person, I can tell you that. All right, cool. So it sounds like some people found the form to be helpful. Some people may or may not use it. And that's fine. We like to give these tools out. And if you guys like it, wonderful. If not, we try to find something else. But again, I think it's more about this, and just to kind of summarize what we talked about today, it's more about this idea of assessing readiness and figuring out, where the person's at in terms of being in a place where they're interested in actually working on this goal. And then from that conversation, potentially developing the different knowledge, skills, and resources the person might need. Just to kind of take this a step further, when we're thinking more specifically of service planning, right? We already have the goal because that's developed and using the assessment. But when you're taking this information from the KSR, all of those things that are unmet needs can actually become the objective on the ISP, which is what we're going to talk about next week. So the goal is what the person wants to work on, and the objective is the step that the person wants to take to work on their goal, right? So if the person, for instance, is wanting to, improve their hygiene in some way and they want to learn how to shower, maybe actually, I'm going to walk that back. I'm going to use a better example. Let's talk about jobs, right? So if the person wants to find employment, and the objective, and they don't have a resume, and that's their unmet need, the objective would then be for them to create a resume, right? That's the step that they're going to take to achieve their goal, okay? And then again, these strengths also play in, right? Because the knowledge, skills, and resources the consumer already has are the strengths. And all of this information then can funnel into the ISP. And I don't want to get into interventions because that's a little bit farther down the line, but this is just how this information kind of funnels into the idea of the service plan. Okay. So before we go, next week is going to be on the ISP, applying the SMART framework. Okay. And for the next ISP, I want you guys to, just in preparation for what we're going to be doing next week, I want you to review a service plan, and I want you to focus on the goal and the objective. And what I want you to do is think about whether the objective is related to a knowledge, skill, or resource needed to achieve that goal. Okay, so just very simple learning application. Take a look at a service plan. I'm sure you guys look at service plans multiple times in the week, and just figure out whether or not that objective is related to a knowledge, skill, or resource. Okay. So Shelly, if you could please, we do have an evaluation. Thank you very much. Shelly just put it in the chat box. Please, everybody, fill out the evaluation. Shelly and I really appreciate your feedback. We take it into consideration. We change things to make sure that they're, if anything needs to be changed, we want to change it because these trainings are for you. And we want to make sure that their information that we're giving you is helpful and that it's useful, and that it's something that you can take back. I know that that's not going to be true for everybody, but if we get 40 something evaluations and all 40 say this didn't work, that's definitely something Shelly and I are going to take into consideration moving forward. Okay, so please, if you thought this training was helpful, please let us know. If you can, please take the time to fill out the evaluations. And I'm just going to throw it out there. If anybody has any questions, we do have 3 more minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. And again, the evaluation is in the chat box. So Roxanne, you're very welcome, Rebecca. All right, let me. Oh, Marta, that's right, because you signed in under Roxanne. Okay, give me a second, Marta. I'm actually going to stop recording.